Sure, if you're not at this, what else are you going at? There's nothing better than going around the harbour having a yarn. Good day, boys. Welcome to this episode 7 of the Harbour Yarn podcast with myself, Harbour Customs, otherwise known as Adam Hatter as well. Boys, you can catch me on TikTok, that's where I'm most active, but I have been cross-posting everything to Instagram as well. So you can enjoy the foolishness across both platforms. This podcast right now is living on YouTube. You're probably watching it right there. But I've also got them on Spotify. If you enjoys listening to your podcast while you're driving along, like myself, buy it. They're there for you to enjoy as well. Boys, how did episode 6 get received? Well, boys, I only put episode 6 out last week. I was holding off on putting it out there. I wanted to try to get a guest on. I never got someone in last hitch while I was home just because it was the holidays and it was fairly busy. But I held off long enough. I was under talking about New Year's on episode 6 and I said, well, boy, you have to soon get on with it. It's the middle of February now. So, boys, I put episode 6 out last week. It's a fairly short one, a little bit different without the guest, but it is out there for you to enjoy. Hopefully you did. Episode 5 before that was with Eddie Shear. I had a dandy laugh with Eddie in for a yarn on that one. It was interesting to talk to him how we got here. It was just by chance, and I kind of related that to my own self, how I got to where I'm working to now, really, just by happenstance. We also talked about his interest in the weather. I got a big interest in the weather my own self, but not to the level of what Eddie got. Certainly not to the knowledge of what Eddie got for the weather. And we talked about how we built life here and all the nice things that goes along with living here in Newfoundland. Sometimes the not so nice things as well, but try to focus on the positive rather than the negative. And getting to that point, when I sat down writing up the running order for this episode 7 podcast, I said, geez, when I was sat down talking to Eddie, I didn't touch on all the negativity that goes along with the forecasting as well, because it's fine and dandy to put out a forecast, but it seems like, especially here in Newfoundland, whatever forecast you puts out, somebody is going to have an issue with it. Whether you got it right or you got it wrong, I don't really know if there's a winning with it. But we never really got to touch on that. I didn't think to ask him actually while we were sat down talking about it, but maybe somewhere down the road, me and him will sit down and have a yarn about it and maybe touch on that bit, how you deal with it, because nobody likes dealing with negativity, but it do be a part of life. Now, boys, what's on the go with me? Well, boys, winter is definitely upon us, and a cold winter it have been. It was cold when I was offshore, absolutely freezing, actually. I was happy to be doing tank work. You won't hear me say that very often, but I was. The tanks were the place to be out to work. It was bitter cold. And while it was that cold, we did get talking about the differences of working offshore Newfoundland in the cold versus up in Alberta in the cold. And I've worked in two of it. And I will say, working in Alberta, minus 30, I go around now with a set of coveralls on and a quilted sweater underneath it. It was fine for most days, unless the wind picked up there, and they didn't have much in the way of wind up where I was at Curl Lake anyway. You know, I could get through the day fairly decent. Offshore, you'd strike it with a -2. Holy Lord, boys, it'd cut you into. Anyone who works offshore in the wintertime, you'll know what that wind is like when she tears through you. And I've often said as well, given the choice of working in Alberta in the wintertime or offshore Newfoundland in the wintertime, for comfort, boys, I'll take up in Alberta any day. Boys, it was cold. And certainly that cold that we had offshore, it followed me right home as well. I've been home about 2 weeks now, and it have been cold ever since I got in. It is the big cold snap. 'Tis only -10, and I know there's a lot of people up in the mainland are going to look at that and say, boy, that's nothing. That's getting into spring for us. But it's a different -10 down here when you got it off the water. And that moisture in there, boys, makes all the difference in the world. It is cold. And I know when I sat down and actually wrote this running order up too, it was one of them days that we got 3 seasons into one day. I woke up, it was mild out, everything was melting. I said, I'll go out and try to shovel off the old slap that's out in the driveway before it turns around and freeze up the next day. And it was actually comfortable outside. You can put on a wood jacket and go along about yourself. As the day went on, the wind kind of changed around. We started getting a little bit of rain. That rain turned into slap snow. And by the end of the day, it was about -8 and everything was froze solid. And I can't really say we got 3 seasons into one day, because it's almost like we started off at an early May day. We skipped all the summer. We landed sometime in September. And we ended up maybe in mid-December or early January when she all froze solid. A popular saying here in Newfoundland, boys, is if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes, it'll change. Not necessarily to something that you like, but you're probably almost guaranteed that it's going to change. Also on the go, boys, is the hatch. You can see I got me all reliable up and me bucket here now. The hat's garnered a lot of interest, boys. I'm still feeling a lot of interest for them. A lot of people just have to reaching out and looking to try to get the hats. I'm skint out of them right now, but I did get a notification earlier today that the next batch of hats is shipped and on the way to me. I likely won't get them this hitch now because I only got another week home. By the time you're watching this, I'll likely have sure. But there is another batch on the way, boys. All new colourways, boys, except for the blue and copper, because it was an overwhelming demand for that colour. I think it looked pretty sharp my own self too. But if you are someone that is looking for help, boys, certainly reach out on DM or on email, harbourcustomsnl@outlook.com. Boys, we'll see if we can't get you fitted out with an old hat. Another big thing that's after happening this time home, boys, and I haven't really put out a whole lot of media on it yet. I started cross-posting everything that I'm doing on TikTok and Instagram as well, and I really put an effort into it after all the talk around the TikTok ban in the States was on the go. Now, that ban only lasted about 10 or 12 hours, I suppose, take it all, but I'm continuing to put everything over on Instagram as well, because different people like to use different platforms to consume their content. So if you enjoy Instagram, I'm putting the content over there as well. Now, since I started putting everything on Instagram, I saw an uptick in the amount of people that was actually coming across my profile on Instagram. And boys, I struck 5,000 followers. Now boys, when I signed up for Instagram, it was only there for me to put a scatter biking video or a skidoo video up every now and again, whatever I was picking at in my spare time. I never ever thought that I'd see 5,000 roll up across the follower screen. And to be honest with you, boys, I couldn't really believe it. Now, that was last week. Even in the span from last week to this week, it's over 6,000 there now. So she is still growing, boys. And I still really can't believe it. Just after getting that popular over there. And I got to say, boys, I'm enjoying it over on the gram as well. You're always getting a lot of interaction back and forth, much the same as TikTok, and I'm always enjoying conversing back and forth in the comments and the DMs with people. It's all a grand laugh, boys, and that's really the whole point of it all. And wrapping it up with what's on the go with me, boys, we had the first sled trip of the year just this past weekend. I tries to get over multiple times throughout the season when the winter time comes. Some years it works great, some years it don't, depending on the weather and what I got on the go. Especially the way the beaches lays down, because sometimes you'll get home and the weather just ain't there for you to have a good sled trip over. But boys, we had a dandy trip. We ended up the Taylorsbrook Road this trip over. The first time I was ever up the Taylorsbrook Road. I usually base this out of Bombay Big Pan in the Jack Leather area and heads into the country that way. This time, one of the boys had a buddy who had a cabin up on kilometre 30 at Taylorsbrook Road, so I said, shag it, we'll go along with the boys. Wonderful time it was, boys. I got to see a lot of different parts of the country over on that side, because it's not normally a place I'd be riding. And we did get into some dandy old caches of the powdery snow while I was over there. I know the first day we went out, I got up on kilometre 50 at Taylorsbrook Road. It was later on in the afternoon. There hadn't been a slid up on the road, and there was about 2.5 feet of untouched powder up there. Boy, you could float along just the same as you was on the sea do, floating back and forth up the road. It was deadly. The weather sort of worked with us, and it sort of didn't. We didn't really have any visibility. We tried to get up in some higher terrain. That was a no-go with the wind and the snow squalls that were on the go. But boys, a dandy trip all the same. Had a good few laughs with the boys that we were staying with over there. I'm sure you'll see a little bit of media come out in the short form on that, because I do got a couple of funny stories out of that trip. Perhaps we'll touch on that in episode 8 a little bit more, but I'll leave it at there for now. Like you say, staying up at Taylorsbrook Road, it's a little bit of a different time than myself. I'm used to hauling up in the truck, offloading my gear into the cabin, and then going on from there and just go. Taylorsbrook Road, you're parking down at the bottom of the road, and however far you got to go in, it all got to go in on the slide. It was fine enough for us the night we went in. The road was fairly good, and the morning, when we got up Sunday morning to haul all the gear out, we were greeted with the nice flat track of the groomer after been by late the night before. And boys, hauling the sled back out over Taylorsbrook Road, that was just the same as win the lottery Sunday morning. We certainly did appreciate that. Now, we come home Sunday morning, and we did get the first big snow of the season over on the Avalon for this year. Sunday night, we got about 30 or 40 centimetres of snow, but it's still not the best for going around on skidoo. Certainly not for the type of riding that I enjoys. I've almost given up on winters on the Avalon my own self, just as well to call a spade a spade. If I can get out on the old beat or the cheateroo, that's about all I'm looking to get out of it. But even on the West Coast, boys, it is starting to get a little bit touch and go. It's just a change in the weather pattern. What I've been saying here lately is the West Coast is getting the winters that we used to have on the Avalon about 10 years ago, where you're getting multiple miles in the winter. Because before, when I started riding over to the West Coast, if you had a mile in a winter, that was about all. Now you're looking at multiple miles in a month. All that being said, boys, it'll make a liar out of me this year, because it is a cold snap right across the province. Hopefully, that'll stay true now right on into March, and we can get some dandy spring riding back like we've been used to years past. That's what I'm hoping for anyway, because I'm not getting another trip this time home. It'll be next time home for me. Hopefully the POW holds in there. Now, boys, moving away from that segment, we're going to get into the next one here on episode 7 of the Harbour Yarn Podcast, and that's the topic section, boys. On episode 6, we were talking about the in-between days of Christmas, and we got a lot of feedback on TikTok. By and large, people enjoys relaxing. Myself, I'm not a very good relaxer. I usually like to be kept busy. So you're trying to find a balance of staying busy, but you're in the flux of the holidays as well. So your schedule is all over the place. Everything is kind of upset. But just trying to find a happy medium in between that. That's where I find the most peace. A lot of people enjoy relaxing. I also see a lot of people say they enjoy watching the World Juniors. Don't follow up myself, but I think it was a bit of a bust this year. Correct me if I'm wrong. Not up on the hockey, boys. What do you do? Now, the topic for this episode 7 of the Harbour Yarn podcast, boys, was New Year's resolutions. And I never got the media put out on that. But as time was ticking along, we're getting into the middle of February here now. As I'm sat down recording this, well, boy, you got to get it out sooner or later. What I was looking for, boys, is do you make New Year's resolutions? And if you do, what do they normally be? And if you do make them, and whatever they are, do you tend to stick to them? Now, I never put the media out there to actually get any feedback back on that, so I'll just give you my own take for myself, which isn't much. I'm not a big fan of the New Year's resolution, boys. For my own self, I figures if I want to make a change in my life, well, as the tack comes across my head, I'll try to enact that change as quick as I can or whenever's best to do so. But I can see how some people enjoy the step change in the year to say, no, we're going to try something new. Now, boys, because we didn't get any feedback out on it, if you want to write in about the New Year's resolutions, boys, you can always hit me up in the DMs somewhere else. The email is always open as well, boys, harbourcustomsnl@outlook.com. If you want to talk about this topic or any topic in the past, boys, feel free to bring them up. We're always down for a good old yarn. Now, boys, putting the New Year's resolutions topic in the rear view and moving on to episode 8 topic. And I did put some media out for the episode 8 topic, boys. Provincial rivalries. Now, boys, this one come to me head with everything was on the go in the news now between tariff talks and renewed Upper Churchill deals with Quebec. I said, what better time than to talk about provincial rivalries? Now, what am I talking about when I says provincial rivalries? Well, boy, I'm only talking about the friendly banter back and forth between provinces. Now, like anything in life, is not always friendly, but trying to keep it a little bit lighthearted and not in the way to sow any division, but almost bring us together a little bit closer. For us here in Newfoundland and Labrador, there's always been a bit of a sore spot with us and Quebec. Now, whether it be the deal on the Upper Churchill that was struck so many years ago that we kind of got the raw end on, or maybe it's just people who don't like the Montreal Canadiens, I don't know what it is, but there's always been a little bit of grit there. But that got me to thinking as well, what about all across Canada? What about everyone else? What kind of provincial rivalries do they look like? Like, say, the Prairies. Do the Prairies really all get along with each other? Or do they have a little bit of grit in between them too for anything else? Then I think about other people. For Alberta, it seems like it's always been an east versus west thing. I don't know. I'm out east. I love Alberta. Spent a bit of time there myself, and I got nothing but love for the boys out there. And then I think about other places, like BC. BC's out there and kind of seems like they keeps to themselves and don't have no beef with no one. And you looks up north to all the territories. The boys are just kind of chilling out up there. Then coming back across the country, we got Ontario. Seems like the big centre of the country. The boys got their own stuff going on. Then we got Quebec there, and then we're moving back into the Maritimes where you got all the eastern provinces there. And they seems to get along fairly well, boys, but you never know what they got going back and forth. But that's only my perspective, living here in Newfoundland. I'm sure there's lots of little gritty points in between, and a lot of fun to be had on the in-between of it, boys. So let us know, provincial rivalries, boys, which do you think is the big ones, and what are they? What are they all centred on? What are they all about? And there's only a bit of friendly back and forth, boys. We're not looking to tear down a new one, although I'm sure some people would like to dive right aboard of that. Liable to see it all by the time episode 8 comes around. Moving on to the next topic of this episode 7 of the Harbour Yarn podcast, boys. The VOCM topic. And as I came up with this one and I was browsing the page on VOCM, it did stick out to me for sure, and it was the Buy Local campaign they were talking about. And like I touched on earlier, boys, it was spurred by all the tariff going-ons that's in the news and in the media there right now. It's something that I'm after touching on in the past, but it's definitely a great idea that we all should have been that long ago anyway. It's always good to try to support the people that are around you for a number of reasons, boys. It helps local businesses, and those local businesses are owned by local families. And if you see someone trying to make a go of it and doing something good for the community, well, you yourself might have an idea for a business on your own self and get that started up, boys. It's like a snowball effect as it keeps going, boys, because when you see a lot of great things in your community, hopefully you get motivated to do the same and put that out into the community for your own self. There's lots of great products and services right here, boys. I'm a bit biased because the wife owns and runs a restaurant here in Bay Bulls, Harbour, and we're all about trying to support local. And certainly after getting into that business venture, it really opened our eyes how much it means to be supporting local. And really at the end of the day, It's your community that's going to make or break you. If you got the support of a community behind you, well, boy, that's probably the best chance you've got at getting the business up and running, because your community support is everything. The people that are around you, your neighbours. But you got to give them a reason to want to take advantage of the product or the service that you're putting out there. So, boys, what do you think? All this talk in the media about supporting local, are you doing about everything that you can anyway to support local? Or do you think that might open your eyes to it and see if you can get out there and support some of your local businesses? Maybe consider some local products. Let us know, boys, and hopefully either way we can spread a little bit of positivity around local businesses. And boys, that brings us to the close of this episode 7 of the Harbour Yarn Podcast. Boys, I do always like to say it. If you made it this far, I do sincerely thank you. I enjoy sitting down and having these yarns and recording them off, but it's a lot of work on the back end to actually put it all together, chop it and cut it into something that's half decent to actually sit down and watch. So boys, if you made it this far, I do thank you. Check out all my socials, boys. I'm most active on TikTok, but everything that's on TikTok is getting cross-posted to Instagram as well. The podcast itself is living on YouTube, but is on Spotify as well if you enjoy listening to the podcast while you're driving. I'm also going to try to put up more of the short form on YouTube in YouTube Shorts. Haven't really been utilising that one so much, but I am going to make an effort in the future. So you'll see that rolling along if you spend a lot of time on YouTube your own self, boys. Boys, I hope wherever you're to, you're staying warm in this old deep freeze of a cold that we got on the go. We did get the big dump of snow here on the Avalon there yesterday, and it looks like we're going to get a Valentine's storm there later in the week. By the time you're watching this, Valentine's Day is long gone and past. So whether you're out and about enjoying Valentine's Day or you got snowbound in, whatever way you had to spend it, I hope you spent it well. And if you didn't spend it well, boy, I hope you're at least warm. Boys, we'll wrap it up there. I hope you stay as well to the next one. And as always, arrive alive, boys. VOCM do care. Take her easy.